Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to next edition of one of our City Pantry webinars. This one is entitled Veganuary, Fad or Future, and we wanted to come together and really talk about what was happening, the state of food trends and things like Veganuary, and especially how the impact of lockdowns and working from home has had on that, and how people are reacting to it. As way of introduction, my name's Shane. I'm the marketing director here at City Pantry, and over the next 30 to 45 minutes, I'll be taking you through a bit of a panel discussion on exactly that topic. We do have a Q&A live at the moment as well, so if you're watching on YouTube, you can add questions to the live chat. When we get towards the end of the panel, we will of course go back and try and answer as many of those questions as we possibly can. And as I said, one of the things that we want to make sure is we're discussing not just Veganuary, but also various other trends that we've seen, whether it be dry January and all sorts of food trends that we see linked to particular days or months. We see a lot more of them cropping up now, and actually how positive they are, how much impact they drive, and then also alongside that, whether or not they have been impacted by COVID, lockdown, and working from home. And I'm joined today, I'm very thankful that four great speakers have given me their time to join in this discussion in this webinar. So I'm just going to quickly introduce them now. So first of all, I'd like to start with Emma Hill, who is from Lucky Saint. Over to you, Emma.
Hi there. Thanks very much for having me. So quick whistle stop. I started my career at Tesco as a buyer, and I've worked for big companies like Diageo, but I've also, and where my heart lies really, is scaling startups. So I joined Innocent when they were very small, Innocent Smoothies, and my last role was MD of Graze. So taking Graze snacks from a D2C brand into retail. And Lucky Saint is a 0.5% superior unfiltered lager. So I'm very excited about dry January, of course, but I also did Veganuary last year, and I pretty much after Veganuary have been about 95% plant-based since. I'm doing it again this year.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. And then I'd also like to now introduce Joe Coulter from Pet Kitchen. Hi, Joe.
Hi there. Hi. So yeah, hi, I'm Joe. My background's in cooking. I'm a chef and co-founder of Pet Kitchen, and we create frozen plant-based ready meals. We started up about a year ago and have a D2C offer now. So we supply people directly over the internet, and we've just sort of moved into specialty retail as well. So just picked up a listing with Planet Organic very recently, which is great. So that's us in a nutshell.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you and welcome. And then Glen Burrows, if I could introduce you from The Ethical Butcher.
Hi, yeah, thanks. I'm one of the co-founders of The Ethical Butcher. We are a business that started just less than a year ago now. And my background sort of isn't in food. I studied food science nutrition, and then in reaction to the BSE crisis, I stopped eating meat 25 years ago. And after 25 years, kind of had a bit of a reassess and looked at my own health, started including meat back into my diet, felt some benefits from it. And for the last 25 years, I've been working in advertising as a photographer and filmmaker. And I kind of was very concerned about what I was doing and the impact. And I met my co-founder, Farshad, who was a meat trader wanting to improve the ethics of his business. And together we founded The Ethical Butcher. And it's the essence of it is to find producers who are farming in harmony with nature with either a minimal or positive impact on the environment.
Thank you very much, Glen. It's good to have you on board as well, to have that kind of a different background and approach to it. Thank you, Glen. And then finally, I'd like to hand over to Mike Strange, who is, of course, one of my colleagues from City Pantry.
Hi Shane, thanks for having me. I'm Director of Ops here at CP. You probably know what we are, but we're an online B2B food platform all about making working lives better. I've been here for 5 years, very passionate about all things tech, data, and food in particular, and I'm a passionate vegan myself.
Indeed, indeed. So thank you all for joining me, and we'll get on with some of the panel discussion points. And as I said, I'll come to each of you individually, but if there is anything you want to add to or bring to the discussion, please feel free to do so. So first of all, I'm going to start off with you know, where we're at. The title of obviously this webinar is about Veganuary. So I'm going to come to maybe yourself first, Joe. And why do you think veganism and plant-based lifestyles have become more and more popular over the past few years?
So why do I think they've become more popular?
Yeah.
Well, I guess there's a big sort of, I think there's a few factors to that, I suppose. There's environmental impact of I suppose intensive animal agriculture, and I mean, there's lots of benefits to the environment for adopting a more plant-based diet. There's health, and I guess there's a sort of animal welfare background as well. So there's sort of three core elements to that. I would say, from my opinion, health seems to be the biggest driver for people to adopt a more plant-based diet, and obviously as a result has sort of borne this big hype that we're seeing now, I think. So yeah.
Indeed, there definitely seems to be that as you said, every January is very much attuned to Veganuary at the moment, or it seems to have at least been for the last 3 years or so. And Emma, I couldn't help, in your introduction, you mentioned that you obviously took part in it last year and have continued on this year. Was that something you decided to do for a health basis, or were there other reasons that you thought about taking on Veganuary last year and continuing it?
Yeah, a very good friend of mine, lovely guy called Paul Brown. He founded Bowl. Bowl make loads of veg pots and all sorts of things. And he halved the value of his business a few years ago when he took meat out, and because he thought it was the right thing to do. And I remember phoning him up. I was on mat leave just before I joined Lucky Saint, and I said, I don't understand, like, why did you do this? And he said, Emma, read these books. And because I had a bit of time, because I was on mat leave, I just started reading and devouring as much as I could on both sides. And I made the personal decision to do Veganuary based on the research that I'd done on the health benefits, the environmental benefits. I started thinking about animal welfare, which, to be honest, I hadn't really before. And that gave me the impetus to do it. I know though, Public Health England have released some stats in January that said 8 out of 10 people are changing their lifestyle. People generally are looking to become healthier, and I think we'll talk later about COVID. But I think one of the main reasons that people are doing it, just the sheer volume of options that are out there now. I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, there was just nothing, like nothing for vegans, not a huge amount for people that didn't want to drink. And this wave of new products that have come is making it so much easier for people to at least try. You know, sometimes we call it try January. Rather than, like, you don't have to burn your bra about it. You know, you can have a go. And I know, and the way that we're all living at the moment, living at home, it's much easier to pop into Tesco or Sainsbury's and buy a no and low alcohol, or try a ready meal, a vegan ready meal. 16% of the market is vegan ready meals. Only a few years ago, it's 3%, and no one's going to judge you, and you don't have to put it on Instagram. You can just you know, so I think it's just, there's a wonderful snowball effect. And this happened in the plant-based movement a few years ago, and it's now becoming mainstream, and you're not going to, you know, less and less likely that your mate's going to take the mick out of you for doing it. And you can try this stuff in the safety of your own home. So I think there's it's a lovely platform at the moment to bounce off for many of us.
Excellent, thank you. A very very good answer. And Mike, you know, from your point of view, I mean, you've been vegan for a number of years now. Have you noticed that change happening over the last couple of years? Have you seen that momentum shifting?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Like, I would echo kind of Emma in that I actually started with Veganuary some years ago and thought, oh, do you know what? Let's give this thing a shot, do it for a month and see how it feels. And at the end of that, I just thought, why on earth would I not continue this? And I had just decided to read a lot more about it. And the more you read, the more you want to read. And I think the reality is that the more people are learning, the more information is becoming available, and the more studies are being done, and the more people are waking up to all this information that previously was hidden, I think. And so to echo what Joe was saying, I think people are thinking about the ethics, People are thinking about the environment, people are thinking about their personal health, they're listening to the advice from the WHO. And ultimately, once it's out the box, I don't think you can put it back in the box.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. And then I want to touch on the bits that we talked about. It's come up a couple of times now in all of the answers, and that's the environmental side of it. And at this point, I want to quickly ask Glen's opinion in terms of that environmental side, because one of the things that we know in a lot of the discussions and research that I've had leading up to this is that I think factory food production, so I'm not using factory farming for a very good reason there, but factory food production is negative in whichever form it is, and negative for the environment. So Glen, from your point of view, it seems like, you know, the ethical butcher is based on the idea that it doesn't need to be a factory mindset when it comes to this side of food. Could you comment on that for me, please?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I would agree with pretty much everything that everybody has said so far, and the reasons why people give up eating meat. Factory farming is abhorrent. It's destructive. It's not good for the environment. It doesn't give. It's not good for animals, and it produces a food which is inferior quality. The same can also be said of intensive arable farming. You know, there are good and bad ways of farming. There are destructive ways, there are neutral ways, and then there are ways which can actually heal the planet. You know, I've read some incredible things about small-scale veganic farming. I've met farmers who are doing arable, which is regenerative. But obviously our business is focused on how animals integrate into a system where they can be used in a way that improves biodiversity and improves soil carbon. And the type of farming that we're talking about, unfortunately, is probably 1.5% of the way animals are treated in the UK. Mm-hmm. And in all honesty, if the type of farming that we do didn't exist, I wouldn't be comfortable eating meat. And that is the truth. And I went through quite a journey when my health suffered. I basically became pretty allergic to most forms of plant-based protein. I became allergic to soy. I couldn't digest many beans and pulses and all kinds of things after 25 years of relying on it. And I received the kind of rebound in health that you guys are talking about, that you know a lot of people get from veganism when they start making healthier choices in general in life. And it is possible to be a conscientious omnivore and live in good health. It's possible to be a conscientious vegan and to make all the right food choices and live and thrive. And the most important thing though is the ability for people like us to have discussions, you know, and what I don't like is this sort of polarization. I love exploring gray areas. I love having discussions about ethics, morality, and how we all fit into it. But and I will agree with you guys probably to 98% of everything we talk about. But farming can be done badly, it can be done well. And when I was researching the business, I saw some incredible transformations of the landscapes where animals were very integral to that shift and that change happening.
Thank you, Glen. And it's a couple of bits that have come up now again consistently. We've talked about the environment. One of the other bits that's come up that we've talked about is health, and that actually people are making this change or making the Veganuary change because of the health impacts, or what they believe is health impacts. And one of the bits that we've actually found quite interesting is that, you know, like outside of plant-based foods, like with any food source, there are foods that are very good for us, and there are foods that are still processed, whether they're plant-based or meat-based or any other type of based. And that actually, how do we go about making sure that people that are trying Veganuary, as we talked about, how do we go about making sure that people that are making this change or are looking into changing lifestyles, whether it's Veganuary or elsewhere, are actually, you know, they're having a healthy change rather than going for something that is mass produced and not particularly healthy, whether it's plant-based or otherwise. And maybe Joe, from your background as a chef, would you like to comment on that first?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And yeah, we see it on Instagram, like sort of vegan food bloggers preaching this healthy thing, and it's full of processed plates piled up like this of processed foods, and you're like, no, this is not right, this is not healthy. And I guess we sort of try and cook with super natural ingredients to bring that forward. But I guess it's going to come down to education, engaging with kids at a young age, actually getting them cooking as well, and understanding where food comes from. And I think that will really help to change that, change the way that we see food, you know, not from actually like where it comes from, you know. So seeing the meat behind a sausage, for example, and I think we've got to start there, really. Got to start with the kids.
Yep, absolutely. I agree that I think it's that education and it's informed choice that it's about. It's about making sure that people are able to make informed decisions rather than as I said, walking into, like, Burger King was a good example in the US where they had their Beyond Meat burger. You know, just because Burger King are selling it and it's Beyond Meat doesn't naturally automatically mean that it's good for you or good for the environment. And that can be misleading to a lot of people, thinking that actually they're doing the right thing, whereas it's not that they're doing the wrong thing. It's there could be better choices that they could make to still have that impact. Emma, could I ask you from your perspective, someone that's taken various startups and various brands, how from a brand perspective would we go about in helping that education and helping foster that understanding of an audiences?
Yeah, I think, just again speaking from personal experience and you know, working with loads and loads of startups, like, do your research. You know, some of us have got time on their hands, some of us don't if you're homeschooling and trying to work, but do your research. Also, it's becoming, you know, the supermarkets are helping in the fact that we're putting traffic light systems on things, so you can automatically see. I know I've got a friend who set up Miami Burger, and he was just disgusted at the fat content that's in a lot of processed food, a lot of even vegan processed food. Have a look at it, and let's be honest, and we know this, fat, sugar and salt makes food taste nice, right? So just have a look at it. Then flip the packet over and look on the back. Look at the actual ingredients. And I remember reading this once, I can't remember the name of the book, but it said, if you don't think that ingredient is in someone's grandma's cupboard around the world, anywhere around the world, then really question it, because it's not natural. What is it? We probably don't need it. If it's man-made, it might be concerning. So have a look at it. And then I think the other part of this, which isn't just about the actual ingredients, is also the sustainability of the source of the products. And I know Oatly are doing amazing things on this, sort of leading the charge on getting everyone to put their CO2 equivalent units on their packs. We haven't actually worked ours out yet, but we will. But I know, for example, all our Lucky Saint ingredients, it's from Bavaria, it's brewed in Bavaria, all the hops are local, it's spring water from the local source. So I'm pretty sure ours would be okay, although I know a lot of water's used in producing beer. But I was reading about this one planet plate, and the WWF in Sweden have introduced it, and they've said apparently you should have about 11 grams of CO2 equivalent units a week as a person. I have no idea what mine is, but this will come. And if companies start getting taxed on their CO2 emissions, they're really going to have to take this seriously. So yeah. I think people have got to get on the front foot of this stuff. We are on our journey to become a B Corp. So this is starting to, force us to ask ourselves certain questions. And the more and more people get involved in this, the more they'll look at the ingredients, the packaging, the processing, etc. And that's only a good thing for consumers and the planet.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Glenn, I noticed you gave thumbs up when Joe mentioned about getting kids cooking and understanding that. Could you talk to a little?
Yeah, I mean, your original question was about sort of health, right? About looking at that aspect, and I couldn't agree more. That the biggest problem we have is that people don't know how to cook anymore. I mean, I grew up being taught to cook. I did O-level and A-level home economics at school. I learned how to do all the classic pastries and everything from scratch. And I speak to kind of my kids and their generation, and they can barely make toast these days. And so they think food is something different to how the likes of us think of food. We think of food as ingredients, and they think of it as meals. And there's a definite gap there. And when you're trying to dial in, I think one of the biggest problems that people have with nutrition is more fundamental than kind of reading packets, is to actually dial into how things make you feel. How do you actually feel after you've consumed something? Do you feel sleepy? Do you feel, do you feel bloated? Do you feel energized? Do you feel tired? Do you feel itchy? Do you feel any of these things can happen? And we really don't, I think a lot of people don't really have an awareness of what nutrition feels like. And it's something you can develop. And I'm sure everybody, on this panel will be aware of this agrees with me more than that. And, I can eat plenty of that and feel great. If I eat a bit of that, I don't feel so great. And honestly, people just have to take responsibility for themselves and develop this awareness. And I used to, I did a bit of nutrition coaching in my career. I worked a lot within the sport, health and fitness world. I was picture editor of Men's Fitness for a while. And I used to meet a lot of athletes who were eating completely the wrong things for themselves. And they were chugging down whey protein and looked 3 months pregnant an hour later and going, yeah, but it's good gains, And it's like, no, man, it's not agreeing with you. Don't have it. Try the pea protein, try something different. But it's, it's two things. It's developing an awareness of how you feel, and it's also learning to cook from scratch, I think, are the key things for this.
Thank you very much. I think that I myself did Veganuary last year. I actually did a slightly different model of it. I was trying to go vegan 1 week every month, feeling that I would then do a bigger portion of the year doing it. And I found as we went into lockdown, it was much more difficult to sustain comparative to when I was working in central London. And primarily it's because I was cooking everything from scratch. I didn't have this plethora of great restaurants on my doorstep and around where I work that could provide me with pre-made or effectively excellent vegan options pre-made. And it was much more difficult to do it from scratch from home. And I definitely learned a lot about doing that. I'm going to hand over very quickly to Mike again, as someone who's been doing it for much longer than I ever did. How do you find that kind of cooking vegan from scratch, Mike? Because certainly we know that, within cities, it's easy to get great vegan food for those that are just trying it. Certainly once you get a bit broader out, it's not as easy. So how do you find the cooking element?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like, I was thinking a bit about what Glen was saying in terms of we need to get back to cooking, understand what goes into our food. And I agree with all that. I think it's really important, but I also think it's really difficult. And I think in non-lockdown times, when we're in our offices and we're going to restaurants and everyone's trying to be as busy as possible and do the latest thing and everything else, it's really difficult to find time to cook. And it's even more difficult to find time to cook something new that isn't the same recipe that you've done every single time. And so it's a big challenge. And I don't think that we can rely on people learning that skill. And so I think that's why you've got this fantastic growth of innovative products like Pep Kitchen, Huel, All Plants, Vibrant Vegan Co, and all these kind of companies that just do it for you. I think if you want to do it, great. The supermarkets are making it easier than ever. It's so easy to find on the supermarket shelves. The local corner store has all your ingredients now. Ultimately, even for a carnivore or for an omnivore, 95% of what they're consuming anyway is vegetables, right? So they know how to do it. It's just a bit scary. But if you're really scared, just get someone else to do it. There's great options.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's it. It's scary is an interesting term to put in there in terms of people moving away, and that leads me on to the next question: is these type of campaigns, or when I say campaigns, these months, the way we attach a food to a particular month, like Veganuary and like Triannuaries come up, and you have Stoptober, and these ways of turning particular months into these periods where you would do this. Do you see that being productive in terms of, it builds hype or builds acknowledgement, and then that's sustained throughout the year? Or do you think just assigning it to these bursts is perhaps counterproductive? And Mike, I'm going to start with you again from that point, as you just finished your point so eloquently.
Do I think it's counterproductive or productive?
Where do you think it lies? Do you think it's good to have these big moments, these bursts? Are they actually creating sustainable change or in people, or is it actually that people do Veganuary and then they pat themselves on the back and go back to their behavior they had before?
I think it's great. I think so many people that I know that are vegan now or super into triathlons now as a result of Trianuary or whatever it was, it often starts from that hype. And it's so much easier to do something when you're doing it with other people, when you're held accountable from your friends. The supermarkets are helping you out because there's adverts everywhere. So I think the hype is great. I think, like, as any good marketeer will know, you can't necessarily just split your budget evenly across a whole time period. You've got to condense it for maximum impact.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it's really, really important. And I think as, like, obviously Greg's, for example, KFC, they see a huge burst of demand and profits that come from this hype of vegan products, but it lasts, and their share prices are going up as a result. Like, interest in veganism has increased 7-fold in the past 5 years alone. So yeah, the long-term change is here to stay.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. With all the passion I would expect, it's very good. And Emma, I mean, it's a very similar question actually, but as someone from Lucky Saint, I'd almost like to ask it about dry January, for example, and like what you see that happening from a low alcohol perspective.
Yeah, I can tell you now that our forecasting was way off for this January. We thought it was going to be big. It's been insane or phenomenal. So obviously the Dry Jan campaigns run by Alcohol Change, and they had 6.5 million people sign up this year, and that was up from 3.9 million last year. I know, just really quickly, on Veganuary, they had 400,000 globally last year, and 580,000 people have signed up this year. It's getting bigger. And I was speaking to Tony from Veganuary this morning, and she said that's not even closed yet. They only count the number of people at the end of the month, and it's going to get bigger. Apparently, Kantar, a couple of years ago, worked out that 10 times the amount of people that signed up to the Veganuary app actually did it. So actually it's going to be in the millions of people that are doing this. It's amazing. So yeah, our uplift's been incredible, both in the supermarkets and online. The third part of our business is obviously pubs, bars and restaurants, something we call the on-trade. That's shut, but the demand's still there. And, you know, the demand for Lucky Saint, it's just exploded over the last year. And I think what's been really interesting, as I said, is the adoption of no and low is happening at home, because you're going to try a no and low Monday to Thursday. But we're in talks with so many people, because we are the only alcohol-free nationally listed on draft. So already they're gearing up, because the on-trade know that as soon as it comes back and people are going to be out back into pubs, bars and restaurants again, you know, the change in what people expect is there. 1 in 3 restaurant meals are alcohol-free. So I don't see it's going to be a very long time before every pub's got a no and low on tap.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's a Lucky Saint, but you never know. And the menu will be better. You walk into these wonderful, wonderful restaurants, and they spend so much time and effort creating these amazing, amazing wine lists. And then they've got, let's not say which brand, on their no and low. So, you know, that's going to come. That is going to come. One study someone drew my attention to today, with some researchers at UCL. They looked at what happened to people after a month off booze. And I would say quite a lot of your listeners, probably relatively healthy people who are drinking moderate to high levels, after a month off booze, but on average, they lost 2K in weight. Their blood pressure decreased by about 5%, and their improvement in diabetes risk improved by 30%. So massive, tangible changes. And if Dry January helps you feel better, as Glen said, like really think about your body, how your skin feels, your sleep improves, etc., etc. And then I also read that Kantar said that 1/3 of consumers have considered adopting an entirely plant-based diet. This is not just, you know, Veganuary and Dry January, not just for January. And 40% of people are thinking about drinking vegan drinks purely. Sainsbury's have looked at that research. So I think I'm pro these months. And I think a lot of people now are saying, are you doing the double? Are you doing Veganuary and Dry January? It's quite a tall order in lockdown. You know, this lovely start at the beginning of the year when you've eaten too much over Christmas, you know, like power to them. I think it's amazing. And sorry, I don't think I quickly mentioned on the UCL research project, 6 to 8 months after Dry January, the proportion of people that were drinking harmful levels decreased by 50%. So it definitely helps people in their longer term plans as well.
So there is a sustainable impact, certainly from that. perspective, which is great to hear. And as I said, it's also nice to have a low alcohol, or as I said, low and no range available that still maintains taste, which as a passionate home brewer is very difficult when you're getting into low alcohol beverages. So I do appreciate the effort that you guys have gone to give dedicated drinkers that option. Joe, from your perspective, how do you see dry January normally affecting your business? Do you see it sustained throughout the year once you've had like a good Veganuary?
Well, if I'm honest, we've only sort of launched our online sales in March last year, so this is our first January. But it's been good. Yeah, it's been, by far our best month to date. So I hope we can. Well, it's about, we've gained new customers, and if we can keep them, then it's going to be great. And I think that's the most important thing. And I think we can. And that's what these campaigns are about. It's about getting as many people to try something new for the first time, and then see and feel and actually live the benefits of that. And yeah, so I hope it works, because it's been good.
Good, very good. Glen, from your perspective as well, we're obviously talking about these months as trends that are changing things. Since you founded the Ethical Butcher, have you found that you're getting more people contacting you and trying to learn more about maybe better farming methods and how that's part of the food chain?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are a lot of people who are very much just surfing on that edge of wanting to eat, not quite wanting to give up meat completely, but really caring about where it comes from. We do have an awful lot of people who are coming to us sort of saying, I just don't feel well. I've been plant-based for a while. I don't know. I'm willing to give it a try. You guys seem like you're doing things as well as can be done. How do I start? And we'll give people, as much advice as we can. And, we've never had, like Joe, we launched about the same time as you guys did, and we haven't had this is up the first January we've had, so it's hard to judge, but our January is going to be as busy as December was, strangely. We really haven't seen a dip. And I think these campaigns in themselves are good because they just bring an awareness to the things that are wrong in industrial farming, any bit of awareness is good. But the thing that slightly puzzles me about Veganuary is, wouldn't Veganuary be better? It's like there's not a lot natively growing. I know it rhymes, but like my gripe with Veganuary, and I just have to get this out there, is that you're having people in Northern Europe trying to eat a plant-based diet when the least amount of things are growing. And what the problem with that is, it does push people towards kind of junk food. And I can see Mike shaking his head, because I know I've had this conversation with a lot of people. There's a lot of imported things you can have and a lot of dried stuff, but I'm a believer in eating kind of seasonal and local. And it's not the best time to try and expand your culinary horizons by cutting out a food group for a month. And I think it would maybe have a bigger success rate if it was done in a different month. I don't know, it's just my thought. But I'm up for anything that makes people make better decisions. I'm pretty agnostic as to what dietary choices people have. I just want everyone to think more about how their food is produced.
Well, I think there's and that's a very good point on the production of food, but I think there's an action there for me and Mike to take away and come up with the snappy name for a second vegan month.
Veganuary. There you go.
We've got it. We could give it a go, and we'll make that happen.
I'm actually, I'll throw this out to you guys who are cooking this all day. Is would you think it would be easier for a non-vegan consumer to go vegan in a different month?
I mean, Mike, do you want to start?
I don't. I think ultimately it doesn't obviously make a difference whether it's in January or whether it's in June. I think what's important is that people are trying it. I think that naturally at the end of the calendar year, people are thinking about New Year's resolutions. They're thinking about a new year, new me, that kind of thing. People often have a very indulgent festive period. They're feeling a bit bloated. They've probably drunk a bit too much and had not enough alcohol-free drinks. And so it's the time to reset. And so, yes, one might be consuming more imported food, but absolutely, they can still eat all the local produce. And even if they're buying imported avocados and that kind of thing, the carbon footprint is still significantly less than any meat options. And so whether it's in June or January doesn't make sense, but with the new year, it's time to try something new.
Fair enough. And Joe, anything to add to that?
There's not much to say on that. Yeah, Mike summed that up pretty well. I think it's very much, yeah, for sure. The bounty of our country's fresh produce is better in the summer, but it's about the sort of January's a reset month, isn't it? It's time for a health kick. It's time for something. So I feel like it rhymes. It rhymes really well. So as a marketing, perfect. So. Yeah, it works. So.
Okay. Fair enough. One of the questions that came up in some of the research and discussions we were having before we came up with the concept of this particular webinar was whether or not, and we touched on it a little bit earlier with the likes of Burger King, and Mike, you mentioned it with KFC, is that how much do we think that they're benefiting and elevating Veganuary and the vegan or plant-based lifestyle versus how much they're perhaps jumping or elevating on a trend for commercial benefit. So Joe, I was going to start with you a little bit on this one, as someone that clearly has a passion and has started a business based on this. How do you feel about those brands? Is it something that you see as positive, or is it something that you see as maybe potentially taking away from the passion that you yourself have come up with?
For me, it's 100% positive. It's about getting as many people in the world, in the country, to cut down on the amount of meat that they eat and adopt a more plant-based diet. So when the big companies are pumping money into it, investing in products, it just raises awareness and it gets people trying food that they maybe wouldn't have tried before. So for me, it's all good.
Fair enough. Absolutely. Emma, you're shaking your head on that one as well. You're in agreement?
Yeah, completely. Like, the more that we can all do, the better. And I think there's a couple of reasons why I think big brands do a good job for convenience. Also taste. Wagamama, half their menu's going vegan in 2021, which I think is amazing. The Hellmann's range, I mean, the vegan Hellmann's mayonnaise is excellent. The Leon aioli is also incredible. Ben & Jerry's, great vegan range. Heineken in our space have done an amazing job, continue to do an incredible job to tell people about Heineken Zero. And I think they're in 57 countries around the world. I mean, if James Bond is drinking low and low, it makes it okay for everyone else. I think in terms of like the David and Goliath front, I think for small brands like us, and I'm sure Joe agrees, like, you make your difference on something. For us, it's quality and taste. So a regular no and low beer takes maximum 72 hours to brew. Lucky Saint takes 6 weeks. To lager, or the word lager is in German is to store. So Luke, our founder, who is the genius behind the liquid and the brand, he really wanted to create a proper Pilsner. So we have 4 weeks of conditioning or lagering. There's only 4 ingredients. I really urge you to turn over your alcohol-free beers and have a look at them. A lot of them contain lactose, milk, because it's a thickening agent. A lot of them aren't vegan because filtration process uses fish guts, which I'm sure loads of people know. We don't filter our beer, so our beer is naturally vegan. So I think, again, do your research, but I think the big brands have got a massive part to play as well.
Okay, and there's a lot of, as I said, again, from my background, there's a lot of stuff there that as you said, you're quite right, is and you'd wonder why more beers aren't vegan, because those, as you said, those unfiltered processes or filtering processes, they're not really required anymore. It's just something that's done for, tradition and clarity, which a lot of people, wouldn't notice anyway. So it's interesting to see that kind of still pervades in the industry when it would be an easy fix to remove that. So I think, from a brand perspective, in terms of those brands bringing more attention onto Veganuary and these points, I then wanted to come back to the situation we find ourselves in now with the pandemic and with COVID, and whether or not we think working from home or being at home all the time has potentially had negative impacts on the uptake of these things. And we've looked at some very top line research using things like Google Trends, and you can see that searches for Veganuary are flattening. They're still up on where they were 3 years ago, but those things have flattened out. Do we think that the pandemic and working from home has made people not less interested, but less motivated, not as able to get involved? Mike, what do you think about
that? How has COVID impacted it and working from home? Yeah, it's a good one. I think inevitably when there's a big external shock, people feel the lack of control, a bit nervous. I think people resort to their home comforts. They're a bit nervous to challenge the status quo. And so I think a real short-term dip is totally explainable. People go back to what they know in an attempt to grasp onto some sense of normalcy. But I also think that when we get these external things, it absolutely shakens our awareness to what's around us and makes us realize the need to adapt, the need to better manage pandemics, the need to manage climate disaster. And so in a recent study, for example, I saw 32% more people are eating vegan as a result of COVID over the past 12 months. New research from Mintel reveals that 25% of young British millennials say that COVID has made a vegan diet more appealing. So I think, sure, there's a short-term dip, people go to their home comfort. I find myself eating my Ben & Jerry's vegan fudge brownie on the couch in the evening for a sense of normalcy. But long-term, yeah, people are adapting and the future's vegan. So that's where people are going.
Very good. Joe, anything to add to that one?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting points by Mike. Lots of good research there. I think he's totally right. I suppose it's a wake up moment, this pandemic, for people. It's made everyone think about their health a lot more. And yeah, working from home, it's a challenge for a lot of people. I think a lot of people I've spoken to this month are starting to struggle with the third lockdown, and I guess people are getting, however much we need people to start cooking, that they do get tired of cooking every day as well. And so having some ready meals in the freezer is no bad thing from my point of view. So
fair enough. And Glen, from your perspective, how have you seen the impact of the pandemic affecting yourself?
We've definitely seen people spending more money on the more expensive cuts, and which creates a problem for a butcher, because obviously you have a limited number of cuts on one particular animal, but the demand that we've had for the more expensive bits has gone up and through the roof. And I think the reason is, although I totally agree with what you guys are saying, people are fatigued with cooking, but when they are cooking, they're spending more time and more money and making it into a special occasion. So I think that we do it in our house. We do takeaway on a Friday night or whatever, but otherwise I'm actually spending more time cooking through the week because I've got a bit more time, and trying to cook new things and looking up new recipes. And we get a lot more people saying, what do I do with XYZ and how would I cook that? And what we're having to do now is to get people to cook not just the primal cuts, not just how to cook a fillet steak, but how do you cook the other bits that we find harder to get people to buy. And this education process is quite necessary. But definitely we sell ingredients. We don't sell kind of ready to eat food. We sell things that people need to cook with. And we've seen a broadening of that through the pandemic, but we've only really known pandemic because we launched about what you did sort of February, March last year. So we've only had a few brief periods of non-pandemic really, but
it's gonna be. I think you highlighted a little bit, Emma, as well. It's going to be wild when we're all allowed back out again. It's a very interesting time.
That's the hope.
Indeed. And then Emma, from your point, you talked a little bit about obviously the on-site side of the business is very different now, but how have you seen the uptake of the brand and the product online since the pandemic started?
Yeah, just to give you a bit of context, January of last year, the team had just launched into pubs, on tap. in 50 venues. And we thought, oh, it's a dry Jan thing. It did really well, right? We sold 3 months stock in 3 weeks. February, we had a bigger month, despite it being a short month, despite it not being dry January. So like, oh, okay. So people do want to buy really good quality pints of alcohol-free on tap, which is great because that normalizes it. Beginning of March, we're having a board meeting discussing the fast or faster plan. And then everything just shut. And 70% of the volume was in on-trade. Because Luke and the team had spent the time getting listed in 30 Michelin star restaurants and 1,800 lovely on-trade venues like Honest Burgers and Dishoom and these wonderful, wonderful venues. So we switched really quickly because we knew people will still want to consume it, but they'll consume it at home. So having lost 70% of volume, literally weeks later, and we pivoted hard, all our marketing into direct to consumer, using Amazon, using Shopify. By mid-April, we were the second biggest selling lager on Amazon. So the only thing that was bigger than Lucky Saint was a 24-pack of Foster's. So it's mad, really. I mean, honestly, it's bonkers. So yeah, the move to DTC was phenomenal because we were a startup, we could move super quick. Yep. So we put our foot down there. And then in September is when I would say we really went omni-channel and went into, from 140 Sainsbury's stores, we went into over 1,500 across Sainsbury's, Tesco, Ocado and Majestic. And then, you know, when you start getting national distribution at scale in the grocers, that really step changes your awareness. And then bonus, January, we were on Saturday Kitchen. We were their only no and low beer. So everything's just gone wild since then. So it's like this wonderful snowball. And, you know, I'm delighted for Luke, who spent 2 years visiting 6 breweries in 3 countries to create this liquid. He did not stop until he thought it was perfect. And he's worked so hard to do what he's done. So I'm really pleased for him. He was 42 days ago. So this is a great birthday present for him.
It's a great story. I do have concerns about the state of the nation when Foster's is the top selling beer on Amazon, but that's an aside. I'd like to thank you all for the feedback you've had on the panel so far. We have got time for a few of the questions that come in via Q&A, so I'm just going to open those up and we can all feed into them. But thank you so much for everything so far and thoughts. So we'll go into the questions and we'll see what everyone's thoughts are. As I said, some of them may be a bit random, but we'll see how we go. So the first one up is, would love to hear everyone's thoughts on lab-grown meat as an alternative or even protein from insects. Glenn, can I come to you first on this one?
Sure. Protein from insects, I think, is why not? I mean, I think it could solve a lot of global problems. There are a lot of places which the production of meat has a different impact, and we're quite where we are in temperate, wet Northern Europe. We can actually keep grazing animals in a way that is pretty regenerative and pretty sustainable. There are other parts of the world where this isn't the case. And one of the things that, when you're talking about insect consumption, one of the things that I think should happen, and we're fighting to make it happen, is insects are a natural part of poultry, of the diet of poultry. We've worked really, really, really hard to remove soy, Brazilian soy, from poultry feed in the UK, and we're trying to work with a lot of feed mills. And some of the natural grazing systems we're using with poultry, the animals, the chickens are eating bugs out of the ground because they've followed the cows through a grazing system and they're getting their nutrition from that. Now, it's illegal at the moment to grow insects to feed to other animals, and that's something that we think is crazy. Why ship soy around the world when you could feed mealworms to the chickens and have this sort of closed loop of nutrition? So that I think insects for human consumption and for animal consumption, I think turns waste products into very usable, bioavailable protein and can solve a lot of problems. Lab-grown meat, I am absolutely, not in favor of at all. And probably the reason that I'm not in favor for it is that animals that lab-grown meat still requires inputs. And if you're having to grow extra corn or you produce extra carbohydrates or source material to grow lab-grown meat, what effect is that extra production having in the world? And I think we'd all agree that, intensive farming is damaging, but also so is monocrop agriculture. Chemical dependent monocrop agriculture it effectively creates deserts, and particularly when those crops are GMO, and if they're, in the case of GMO soy, which is glyphosate resistant, that's a terribly destructive chemical to be dumping on the world. And my worry about lab grown meat is it's shifting the problem. It's not dealing with it. It's creating a different problem somewhere else that you won't see. And that problem is producing the raw materials required as inputs. How does that happen? So I think people need to eat less meat, better meat, and really think about how it's produced. I think that animals need to be put back into rotation with arable crops to restore soil health. But lab-grown meat, I don't think is a solution to this.
Okay, all right, very good, very legit. Thank you, Glenn. That's very in-depth. Joe, your thoughts on this particular topic?
Well, that was really interesting, Glenn. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to that. It was quite educational. Yeah, I think you're right. Actually, I think I kind of had before. I kind of had an idea that I kind of thought that maybe lab grown meat would be okay, but actually, I think you're right. It's shifting the problem. It's not solving a problem, and it's not, and ultimately that can't be sustainable. So yeah, I think, but I think it's a big question that needs. Yeah, there's a lot.
We could go so deep down so many channels with this one, but I think hopefully we both agree that that's a dead end.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I mean. Mike, have you got any further to add on the insect or lab grown? Because as I said, from my mind, it's stuff I hadn't even thought about in that lab grown side of things, and actually, even I'm sitting a bit. But yeah, that makes sense. Why would I do that? So, yeah, Mike, what from your point of view?
Insects, I think, are an interesting one. I tried them some years ago. The Economist was doing something in London where they were handing out free insect on ice cream. It was entertaining. As far as we know, there's no negative health impacts. The environmental impact is low. But a major 2016 paper that came out does recognize them as sentient. So I'd certainly challenge them on the ethical grounds. Like, if there's a better alternative, i.e. not consume meat at all, then why bother when we can just reduce suffering, which I think is the better option. Lab grown meat, yeah, it's certainly a contentious one, isn't it? I completely agree with everything that's said, to be honest. I think that you're right, there is still inputs. I think it's worth recognizing that over half of all the crops that are grown at the moment are going to feed livestock. So that's where the inputs are going. I don't think it's just shifting the problem. I think that's a slight oversimplification. Lab-grown meat does have fewer inputs. I think it's a better alternative to what we might call real meat, I guess. So I think it's a better alternative. But I went to a lecture by Dr. Mark Post not too long ago. He's the founder of Mosa, which is a Dutch lab-grown meat company. And at the time, it was still about 255,000 euros per patty to create. So I don't think it's going to be commercially viable for a while. But yeah, there's still inputs. I think vegan is the better option. Like, the animal agriculture world is filled with quasi better alternatives that all seem to come with a catch. And yet there is one truly sustainable, animal friendly suffering reduction option out there, which is plant-based.
And Emma, just to round up, are you going to be picking any lab-grown meat in the future if it comes up?
I mean, my house, we've tried everything. My partner's actually been a vegan for 7 years. It was only, I only did Veganuary last year, so it took me a long time to come around to it. For me, it's all down to taste. So the lab-based products for me taste very, very similar to meat. I'm not a wild fan of the taste of meat. So when I've had them, I've been like, oh, like, to me, they taste like meat, so I'm just not interested. So for me, it's all about taste. And I will defer to Glenn, who knows much more about this than I do in terms of CO2 emissions and sustainability, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next question that came in was, I think we covered some of this already, but we'll go over it anyways. Do you think some of the changes that have come about from COVID will stay once the pandemic ends? So, for example, Glen, you mentioned customers buying more premium cuts of meat. Mike, you've mentioned about veganism continuing to grow, and obviously Emma, you've mentioned the continued rise and success of Lucky Saint in terms of the retail output. So do we think all of these changes and these trends that are happening now are going to continue on once the pandemic ends? Everyone can jump in with a one-word answer if they like.
I'll just give a quick bit of context on no and low. UK, 1.2% of beer is no and low, nothing. When you look at Spain at 18%, a lot of Eastern Europe at 10%. So for the UK, 100%, but I think we're going to catch up very, very quickly.
Thank you, Emma. Mike?
Is it going to stay around? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the more that the big brands are taking it on, it's on every supermarket shelf. The celebrities and influencers are all over it. You've got all the sports people, Novak Djokovic, Serena Williams, Lewis Hamilton, they're all turning to plant-based. Chris Hemsworth did it for a while. Like, these are sports people. There's certainly not a health concern. Science tells us it's the most environmental thing to avoid climate disaster. So if we want to be here to find out whether it does stay, it has to.
And Glen, from your point of view, obviously the question raised one of your answers in terms of the premium cuts. Do you expect to see that sort of trend continue with people focusing more on maybe cost over quantity?
Yeah, it's so weird because, you know, we launched February last year. We haven't had a year of trading and we haven't had a normal year. So we've gone from startup to, you know, to where we are now very, very quickly. And it's very, very hard to see how, whatever the new normal is, how it's going to affect our business. One thing all I can say is that I, you know, genuinely hope that people ask more questions and make better decisions after this, regardless of what they choose to eat.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Joe, finally over to you. Is there anything you'd like to add on the trends after the pandemic subsides?
Yeah. Well, I guess I see a big flexitarian trend continuing. Not necessarily everyone becoming full-time vegans, but if everyone could be more vegan, then I think we would see huge benefits from that. And that's a trend that I hope continues. I suppose it's making small changes by lots of people rather than maybe a handful going full time.
I want to try. I looked on your website. I want to try your stuff. It looks great.
Right. Cool. So yeah.
Well, once again, thank you very much for your input. Thank you very much for this discussion. I've really enjoyed it, as it has been a lot to think about, and by the comments and the chat that's been going on YouTube and on social media, there's a lot of interesting conversation that was sparked. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for joining me, and to everyone that's following us along live, thank you very much for listening to us. I hope it's been a useful and interesting conversation that has maybe sparked you yourself to go and make that informed choice, do some research, find out more about what you're eating and how that can impact your health and the health of the planet around you. So thank you, everybody. Thank you once again, and join us on our next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.